Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the launch of the DCU. This is my Creature Commandos Episode 1 and 2 recap, review, and breakdown. And it's pretty crazy to say that the DCU is technically officially here. And I say it like that because James Gunn has always regarded like the proper start to the DCU, and I would tend to agree with this, is the live action Superman, and that's where you're gonna kind of mainly get the proper taste and feel and exposition of this new DC universe with this established history. However, Creature Commandos most certainly gives us our first peek. But I can't wait to see what you guys thought of it, so please don't forget to let me know down in the comments below, and if you guys have any theories, it's going to be interesting to see what you have to say there. Just full disclosure here, I have seen the whole season. Also, just to let everyone know, by the time you're seeing this video, this is going to be my last video until roughly next Wednesday. When you're seeing this, I'm going to be getting married tomorrow. Then, knowing my luck, the Superman trailer will release on Saturday or something like that. Hopefully not. Hopefully it is mid-December according to the latest rumors. And then I'm going on a little mini moon and I'll be back Wednesday. So bear with me there. I'm sure a lot of you understand, but without wasting any further time, would really appreciate a like on this video to help show your support for the Creature Commandos reviews and our launch into the DCU. So right away, guys, I was pretty impressed when I first saw this in my screeners. And I say impressed because, you know, as I've said before, I didn't know how much to expect in terms of exposition, and I'm not saying this is crazy exposition, but the episode picks up right away, launching us just right into it at the Belle Reve Correction Center, with Waller and Rick Flag Sr. watching the report on the news about a battalion calling themselves the Sons of Themyscira, and how they violently crossed the border into Pakistan, and the news report details that the Sons are said to be working at the behest of the rogue Amazonian and reputed sorceress Cersei. Now, what really caught my attention right off the bat here is especially when the news host goes on to say that Cersei claims to be the rightful heir to the throne of the perhaps mythical, perhaps real, all-female island nation of Themyscira. Inside sources claim that Cersei has promised the Sons that once the downfall of Pakistan is achieved, she will lead them to conquer Themyscira. So, you know, instantly here, let's break that down for a second, because the news reports Cersei as a rogue Amazonian, and that she claims to be the rightful heir to the throne of Themyscira. So to be transparent here, I was a bit confused at first because I wasn't mega sure if Cersei's origins were that of being an Amazon. But again, the more I looked into it, and I have looked into Cersei in the past, especially when doing research for videos when Anya Chalotra was first cast, the more I realized her lore is quite messy. And if any of you know about Wonder Woman's history, let alone like Donna Troy, you know, that they're characters who have quite a messy source material lore backstory with the reimaginations and whatnot, and Cersei has definitely been imagined a few times now. Now, don't get me wrong, she's thousands of years old, and I know it's usually the case that after being exiled from her kingdom, after killing her husband, she meets the goddess Hecate on this island, and that's how she came into her magical sorceress powers and how she kind of became known as Cersei the Witch. And she would then basically go on to influence the world of men, translating that to basically stirring shit from afar. But what I'm thinking now is perhaps in this iteration, maybe they're going with a version where she was quite a figure in Themyscira, but perhaps got cast out by Hippolyta, and that's how she arrived on that island where she gained her magic. I mean, sure, like what the reporters said might not be true. That could just be their interpretation. But at face value, let's just hypothetically assume that they have their details correct, and that's what they're reporting here, and that Cersei is a rogue Amazonian in this iteration, just one that has been exiled from and is a enemy to that of the Amazons of Themyscira. But what I just find even more super fascinating about that prospect is just considering that Gunn did eye Anya Chalotra for a live-action DCU role when casting her as Cersei in Creature Commandos. Commandos. And I really, at this point, maybe I'm going too far with this, wouldn't be surprised if, as of when we see the prequel Paradise Lost in the DCU, which we know is said way into the past, surrounding the Amazons' politics in a Game of Thrones-esque described way, that we could see Anya Chalotra perhaps reprise her role in that show, and rather than being a princess of a different region, then getting exiled, perhaps in the DCU's iteration, we could maybe even see the origins of her being outcast from Themyscira. Maybe she goes way back to the foundations of the island from the gods and Zeus, especially when they add in that Cersei claims to be the rightful heir to the throne of Themyscira. Like, maybe it comes into her being the daughter of the god Helios, with her maybe feeling like she has a claim to Themyscira, given that her father is one of the Olympian powers that be, or Titan, technically, if you will. I guess another little point would be that Themyscira is still a wondered about thing in the DCU, which, you know, kind of does make sense since no man is allowed there. So any peeps or little tidbits of information they know would be fairly limited, or after having seen Wonder Woman out and about, maybe. Let me know what you thought about me tangenting about Cersei there. As I always say, not to like hammer it in, adaptations don't copy and paste, so they may be doing some interesting, you know, innovations in this iteration of Cersei in the DCU. Not to mention her armor, for crying out loud, is very Amazonian, and she looks badass. So I would love to know any theories, but I thought that was quite a huge way, even if a subtle kind of cool, you know, minor exposition to start off the episode. But I love how they got that footage of like Amazons at Themyscira. Is that meant to be real? Because how did somebody get that footage of them all just standing there as the Amazonian warriors? Maybe it's just like their mock-up of what they would look like since they don't have footage. There's all of these questions I'm asking now. But yeah, the Sons of Themyscira, basically we kind of have a bunch of simps following Cersei with lines of, oh, you tell me, oh dude, only women can live there? Oh, what, that is so sexist, bro. And I have this question for all the woke feminists out there. Why do only girls get such cool waterfalls? Now, it is kind of ironic for me to call them simps of Cersei, since the Sons of Themyscira are blatantly portrayed here as a bit of a political commentary, to say the least, on incel-y type people, yet they're following Cersei, who is a woman, but like at the same time, their lines and, you know, just the way they're acting are blatantly like, you know, coming from one direction. Now, I don't know if this is going to piss people off, because I remember details like this leaking before these episodes released, and people were like, oh god, please don't tell me the Sons of Themyscira thing is true. I maybe I'm just being like naive here, but I just find it as a bit of like a piss-takey kind of joke. I feel like if you take offense to something like this, I don't get why you would, unless you share similar values. I don't know. Or maybe, to be fair, like, you're just like, oh, I don't want political commentary, even if it's taking the piss at people like this. I don't know. But for me, I don't really care. Like, it's just funny, if anything. And it's not like they go too hard or make it like a main thread of the show each and every episode. Do you know what I mean? So a little one-off thing like that, I don't find, oh my god, Creature Commandos is so political and blah blah blah. But the Sons of Themyscira in the comics are actually Amazonian-born males that are abandoned at birth, as let's just say that the Amazons were kind of hoping for a girl instead. So obviously these guys aren't the actual Sons of Themyscira, but that's where the name comes from. We then learn from Waller that since Bakolistan is an ally to the US, given that Princess Ilana Rostovic was negotiating with the US for oil, well, they need to go and protect her from being overthrown by Cersei. Now, for those who may be hazy on details, or if you're kind of new here but you're interested in the show, Waller is essentially in a position now of being forced to go about things a bit differently after her daughter, in the events of Peacemaker Season 1, exposed Argus and the way that they used people to go on Task Force X Suicide Squad missions. Now, this, if you didn't know already, is a thread, a little thread of canon being maintained from the previous universe, the DCEU. So as Gunn says, just to make it crystal clear here, basically anything canon going forward or any thread that is maintained from the previous universe's lore is only going to be canon if they mention it. So this is a perfect example of that. And so we get introduced to the Belle Reve non-human internment division, and we get introduced to each character, initially the bride, and then Dr. Phosphorus with his irradiated skin, and then of course Weasel, a character, as Waller goes on to say, that he's one of the few soldiers alive from Project Starfish, so we know he has what it takes to survive. So once again here, another canonical reference to the DCEU, because Project Starfish was the whole plot of James Gunn's The Suicide Squad movie. But with this line, Rick Flag also gives a bit of like a sad face moment or reaction to Waller, with Waller then apologizing, saying that she wasn't meaning to intimate anything about his son, saying when he died in Corto Maltese, he died a hero. And so for those of you who do not know, or again maybe new here, Rick Flag, played by Joel Kinnaman, died in the Suicide Squad movie at the hands of Peacemaker. Now this is Rick Flag's father, Rick Flag Sr., and he will go on to reprise his role in the live-action Superman movie coming out next summer, but also he will continue into Peacemaker Season 2, where clearly he's got a little bit of a score to settle with Peacemaker himself, because after all, he killed his son. So again, another little thread of canon here being maintained. And then we have G.I. Robot, who got a lot of kills in World War II, the lovely Nina Mazursky, and Waller says that she's the smartest and most reasonable of the bunch, and maybe will help keeping the rest of them in line. And of course, they all try and instantly escape when Flag and Waller enter the room, but they get electrocuted. So this time they don't really have a bomb in their neck. Perhaps it can be programmed to, I don't know, explode as well, but for now it sends an electric shock into their brain. And we get that brilliant intro with even Gunn popping up in there. And no, that's not to mean that he's in the DCU, like I saw some people having taken this to mean when details were leaking, which just kind of makes me laugh, because maybe that detail leaked because somebody saw that intro, so they thought that Gunn was an actual character in the show, but really it's just a bit of fun from the animators. And so we get right into the mission after this. The Creature Commandos head directly to the castle to protect Princess Rostovic from Cersei. We get that moment also when Rick Flag salutes, but Waller doesn't really notice, so he feels a bit awkward. And this just speaks to Rick Flag being an honorable soldier. And I know I said this in my no spoilers review, and I know this is only the first 2 episodes, but you might already see what I meant about Rick Flag Sr. and how he's just genuinely a nice guy, where I thought he'd be a bit more rough and gruff, a bit more harder on everyone, but he really is like very sound, very fair, and you know, I can't wait to see how this character evolves going into Superman and Peacemaker Season 2. And so they're all together in the chopper, the song kicks in when they arrive, and as per the tracks from James Gunn in his previous movies, this is just great, and I just feel like it complements the episodes and the tone, the characters of the show as well, and this music kind of reflects the location that they're going to. And as they arrive, some of the sons of Themyscira spot the Creature Commandos on their way to the princess and report back. Nina even waves to a kid on the streets, and she gets sad when her mother kind of pulls the kid away. And this is just like a little small foreshadowing into, I guess, like the rejection that you'll learn that Nina has had to deal with throughout her whole life without giving too much away there. Now, when they get to Princess Ilana's castle, it's a very mythical looking castle that they arrive at. And sure, you have some crazy architecture in our world, but man, this just kind of made me think of everything else that can exist in this fantastical world of the DCU, which again is why I'm so excited to get that kind of flavor and hint when we see Superman, just even like looking at the Daily Planet and the buildings that will be in Metropolis. But anyway, as they go throughout the castle and see all of the relatives of Princess Rostovic, they were kind of like, you know, maybe expecting the princess to be just as, well, beautiful would be the last word on their list. But when she arrives, let's just say that Rick Flag Sr.'s breath gets taken away. And this just kind of brings me to the humor when they take the piss out of Rick Flag's middle name, or when he doesn't do the customary bow, so then the knights say that they have to kill him. As you can tell, like, little things like this are quirky, and it's a bit reminiscent of the Peacemaker humor, all while, I would say, still being a bit different. And I personally enjoy this, but I do want to stress for those who always get concerned by this, that this doesn't mean that, because I keep seeing it, even as of my Creature Commandos No Spoilers review, like, oh, I'm really worried about Superman now. You're not going to get this, like, level of humor in Superman, let alone Lanterns, and, let alone they're not going to be R-rated. I mean, we don't know about Lanterns, but Superman is not going to be Creature Commandos R-rated kind of Peacemaker, the Suicide Squad, Creature Commandos humor. As we continue here, there's a banquet thrown for the honored guests, and Weasel is kind of going ham on the food. Phosphorus is irradiating it. Nina eats it through a fishbowl, and G.I. Robot gets some diesel fuel for a bit of munch. And you can tell that Ilana Rostovic is, taken quite a liking to Rick Flag Sr. with just, how she's acting around him. And as for the Queen, like, my God, she is like, virtually dead, like basically a zombie. Now, a pairing that's growing in this first episode is between G.I. Robot and Nina. As usual, he's going on about wanting to go back to his glory days and kill a bunch of Nazis with Nina, and after what Nina said, he's overjoyed, and he's like, oh my, G.I. Robot has been waiting for a friend to kill them with for 74 years, down to the minutes and the seconds, which is kind of an endearing quality about the character, even though he's on about, I need to kill them, I need to. It's like, it's his passion in life. This is one thing I do enjoy a lot about the show, is that you have very different types of monsters in the Creature Commandos that just provide for great dynamics on screen, with more to come, most certainly, in the episodes ahead. But back with Flag and Ilana, they talk a little bit about his life, and he even talks about how he was once married, and even his son. Now, I know a lot of people say that Frank Grillo seems a bit young to play Joel Kinnaman's dad in the DC universe, even though I think he's actually 60 years old. But they do detail here that he was super young when he had Rick Flag Jr., when he mentions that he was only 18 when they first had him. And then at 18 years old, Rick Flag Sr. joined the military, mostly to just make money to support him, but 18 years later, Junior joined the military because he loved their country and wanted to make it better, even saying that he was an improvement on him in every way. Can't wait to see more about this in Peacemaker Season 2, because that's when I think we're going to get the next major dose of that, because we know that is a kind of core thread for Rick Flag Sr.'s role in Peacemaker Season 2, according to Frank Grillo. I think we're going to get Joel Kinnaman flashbacks, because they already gave it away that Joel Kinnaman is going to be in Peacemaker Season 2, but also, we could have Peacemaker hallucinating Rick Flag Sr. with his guilt over killing him. Now, it was in this moment where we learned another cool tidbit about the DCU, and that's when it takes place. So, given that Flag says that Rick Flag Jr. passed around 2 years back, so the DCU is officially said 2 years after the Suicide Squad movie, which is when Ilana says, I'm sure your son was a fine man, but I'm much more fond of older men. And so Ilana takes Rick Flag Sr. into her bedroom and she strips naked, but Rick Flag, being a man of honor, and he's all dutiful about it, kind of thinks that it's not really ethical, and, he's here to protect her, and so he leaves. Now, just to kind of say this, one thing that I've seen going around is that this show is like very, sex scene oriented, and it's like really adult, and it's so dirty and disgusting, which I think is such a false, like, naysayer commentary to go around about this series. Like, other than this scene, and then the scene in the bathroom with Rick Flag Sr., and that flashback to the bride and Victor, which, was to do with that story, which I don't view as like, oh, this is dirty for the sake of it. That was like a scene for the story. That is it. Like, out of all the 7 episodes I've seen, this is just like a no spoiler tidbit, I guess. That is it. Like, how does that make Creature Commandos like, oh, a very sex oriented, like, dirty, James Gunn minded show? Like, no, like, man, you have to stop me from ranting here, because I'm not trying to sound shilly, but that was like a major commentary going around when the embargo lifted from a lot of kind of, I guess, anti-DCU people out there or channels. But no, like, I mean, again, you did get that jokey scene, I do admit, with Rick Flag Sr. and Ilana in the bathroom, but that is the extent of that. I wouldn't view the bride and Victor Frankenstein in that flashback as like, doubling down on that. That was more just, the bride's backstory. And it's not like you don't see sex scenes in movies doing a scene like that for the purpose of the story. So anyway, this is when Dr. Phosphorus takes the opportunity to try and escape through going after the remote that Flag has, which of course can electrocute them. Now this turns into quite a funny brawl, accompanied by another track which just suits the hecticness of the fight, leading them to fall through the floor and into the kitchen. And I'm not gonna lie though, I did feel like Flag was pretty damn lucky to get out there alive, given Dr. Phosphorus and his radiation abilities. I mean, I guess you could argue that Phosphorus was holding back a little bit to just maybe not get into too much trouble killing him if he didn't succeed in getting the remote. So after besting Phosphorus, and fair play to Flag for even achieving that, he reveals that this isn't the only remote that can be used to detain them, and even says that he isn't going to tell Waller and he's not here to torture them. They're supposed to be on the same team. So again, I think Flag seems to be a good boss to have. I'm not gonna lie, like the Creature Commandos have it pretty good. Now, at the very end of episode 1, this is when the bride leaves to head to Frankenstein's castle to take our kind of first dose into the origins of the Creature Commandos. And Nina goes after her, which just provides for another entertaining pairing. Again, I kind of love how polite Nina was as the bride just takes that knight's money. And so they arrive to where the bride was born, and the castle is all run down and abandoned. However, we have an old lady nearby who's been keeping watch, and she notices them enter, and she gets her phone out, which has a bloody Zac Efron wallpaper. I don't know what that was about, but it did make me laugh. And she rings up Eric Frankenstein, who is chilling on a yacht with a bunch of women partying, and he's just like, "My bride, after all of these years, I found you," with tears kind of streaming in his eyes. So yeah, that just gives you a hint to Eric Frankenstein there. And that is the end of episode 1. So this is why I'm really glad that they decided to do a double episode drop. Like, that's not me putting down this episode at all, but it was just like, initially for episode 1, an introductory episode to the story and the characters, something foundational to head off with without really like too many crazy things happening. But through giving us these 2 episodes as well, it really gives us like a fully firm, sturdy launching point into Creature Commandos that just kind of makes you want to see more and just where the plot goes after this second episode. Whereas if it was just episode 1, I'm not saying people would have found it bad, but they may not have been like fully captured by the premise of the show. But I believe episode 1 and 2 combined do deliver that craving to the audience. And also, overall with episode 1, not a crazy leap into exposition or crazy Easter eggs for the DCU like I teased in my no spoilers review, other than the mention of what's going on with Themyscira. But again, guys, there's plenty of episodes. Well, there's 7, but there's more episodes to come. So let's just say there are opportunities there. But now let's get on to episode 2, where things pick up that much more. So what I liked most about episode 2 is that as you delve more into the characters' backstories here, namely with the bride initially, despite being branded Task Force M for monsters, you begin to really see how they're not as monstrous as you had initially thought. And kind of as I said in my no spoilers review, some more than others there, but even then, those who are worse, arguably worse, took that path in life due to things that happened to them in their past, which again just kind of adds that beautiful blurred line that James Gunn delivers so well between this kind of comedic tragedy that he often puts into a lot of his characters, especially the team-oriented projects just like this. So as we get into episode 2, we really pick up right where we left off with the bride's backstory as we get into a flashback to 1831 in the DCU. So the stage is set with Victor Frankenstein hesitantly giving Eric Frankenstein the opportunity to have a wife, one that will be created in the same way that he was. Now, Victor isn't like so sure about doing this because he feels like he has not really learned enough from Eric to justify doing this again. And already right off the bat, you can just see everything that Eric is in a nutshell here. After being created from nothing, one of the biggest ways he wants to be human is that he yearns for love. And you can see how Eric's threshold for anger is insanely small. Like how I mentioned before, and how he's just very impulsive and childlike. Now, there's a bunch of gathered body parts from what the mortician provided for Eric to pick out and create his true love. But then we're suddenly back in present day as the bride and Nina walk around the castle. And we're taken into the chamber where she was created, reminding her of that very moment. And we see her being electrocuted in the true Frankenstein way, and she comes alive. Yeah, sorry about that. But, Eric is just standing there with flowers, desperate to meet her. But Victor explains that when a baby is born, she's known nothing but her mother's womb, and therefore her mother intimately for 9 months. But your bride, she came from nothing to something in an instant. She has no tether, doesn't know where she is or who we are. She is a cluster of fear and not knowing. And I guess you could translate that onto Eric Frankenstein with just regards to how he is technically mentally like a lot younger because he was also created from the void of nothingness and didn't spend any time in a womb. And so he is a person without any human connection other than Victor as well, and one who craves it above anyone else. So as you can imagine, if that was you, it must be a terrifying experience. And in this moment, we get the start of the bride and Eric's story. Like truly, like Eric pops up in her face and he just terrifies her. And you can see how scared she was of him in some of the flashbacks that we get a little bit later on in the episode, such as when the bride comes across the bedroom and she's trying to avoid Eric and he's just so desperate to get his hands on her, acting erratically, and Victor is trying to calm him down, trying to stop this, which is when Eric almost kills Victor in an outburst because he was meant to make her love him, which is a bit of a foreshadowing to later on, to say the least. And we learn that the bride is looking for the necklace given to her from Victor, which just brings us to another flashback with us seeing Victor teaching her how to speak. What I really enjoyed about these flashbacks to the bride's creation is that we see this very endearing version of her, like a version of her that is so new to the world and so innocent and kind-hearted, and yet, best of all, even if it's few and far between, we get to see cracks of that version of her in present-day scenes throughout the show. Now, meanwhile, we cut to one of the sons of Themyscira reporting back about the bride and Nina being at Frankenstein's castle, with the rest still back with the princess. And speaking of, guys, this is where we first properly see Cersei. And Cersei is just chilling here, eating food and using her magic to drink beer, with all of the men around her more or less worshipping her as she seemingly puts up with their presence. But back with Rick Flag, after his fight with Phosphorus, we have him being patched up by Ilana Rostovic. And of course, she takes this opportunity with his shirt off to once again try and come onto him. And let's just say that eventually he succumbs to her temptations. And oh my, like Ilana is very thirsty. And let's just say a lot of activities commence. Now, outside, we have Phosphorus and Weasel and G.I. Robot listening in, not wanting to interrupt with the night arriving, so they're covering their boy here, guessing that maybe he might hold out for 30 seconds. But, he's an older guy, and that's when Phosphorus says he probably has a lot of experience, so give him a full minute. But I have to admit, again, like with this humor, it did make me laugh, especially with Phosphorus trying to cover and give Rick Flag Sr. some time to finish the activity. trying to avoid demonetization here. So Nina finds the necklace and we cut back to another memory. This time the bride can talk a lot more, and the bonds that she's creating with Victor, I would say, is pretty sweet. You know, I love how in this moment she doesn't understand what a present is, thinking that it was just a box. It's like, oh, you know, lovely box. Or to understand that you even had to open the paper to unwrap it. And inside is the necklace. And, you know, all of this just casts her origin in such a sad light, from such innocence to, you know, comparing where she is at now. Which is when, ladies and gentlemen, as we cut back to present day, we have Cersei arrive at Frankenstein's castle and she starts unleashing her magic, creating crazy blasts of destruction. And again, I know I keep saying it, but to imagine her in live action, please, James Gunn, please make it happen with Anya Chalotra. Now, as this is happening, Flag learns that the bride and Nina are gone and they start driving, but things are getting nuts back at the castle, with the Sons of Themyscira also raiding the place, which just leads to another brilliant needle drop moment, initiating the fight between the bride and Cersei, as she, with her super strength, just lobs a bunch of items at everyone. And you've got to admit, Indira Varma here as the bride is just badass, like absolutely badass, considering she took absolutely everyone out with her bare hands. And it got brutal. Like, people were being launched out the castle, furniture was being thrown at them, heads smashed. She jumped out the window and, you know, just landing from a great height, unleashing their own guns on them. And I think what I loved most was how she just held her own against Cersei, who has super insanely powerful magic from the comics. Now, the critique part of my brain was like, well, you know, given what Cersei can do and how she is easily able to turn the bride's arms into these balloon-like things, that, again, you know, honest critique here, it felt a bit convenient for the bride to get this far. But then again, to use some comic book logic here, I guess one way to counter my own critique is that I think maybe Cersei's downfall initially in the beginning part of this fight was that she underestimated the bride, despite all the power she had, which is why the bride managed to get quite a few punches in. Now, during the fight, they kind of oddly timed every punch that, you know, Cersei gave the bride with that explicit scene between her and Victor getting it on in the past, with Eric just watching in the background, heartbroken. And, you know, my God, like, we all know what Eric is like, and he walked in on that. And Cersei, in this moment, bests the bride, saying, I have a message for your leaders, but the bride manages to stab her through the foot and kicks her so hard in the crotch with her strength that it literally shatters the jewel on her belt. Now, that must have killed, considering the force it would take with that kick to, like, you know, ripple throughout and crack her armor like that. And Cersei's reaction was priceless as well. Now, just as the bride was getting the upper hand, Cersei turns her hands into, like, these balloons and her arms and throws her off the roof. Now, poor Nina's helmet also gets broken by the gunfire and she starts suffocating. And this is where the episode ends. They both seem to be dying. And as the bride lays there on the ground, we cut back to the past and we see the innocent version of the bride excitedly bringing Victor a drink, but she notices Eric and he says, I did what I had to do. And he feels as though his wretched giggling and horrid gift-giving powers were the only obstacles to their love, and so he murdered him, and kind of even split him in two, even. Now, the bride goes absolutely crazy at Eric, and, you know, you can understand why she, might never ever want to actually be his bride. This causes a fire, the necklace gets lost in it, and Eric even lands in the fire, and the bride is just distraught. And this is where the scenes get all snappy as she makes her escape from the castle, and I guess you could say that this chronicles the bride's and Eric's history history together as of that moment right up until present day. And this man has not left her alone for a single minute, as we see a montage of him coming after her again and again throughout history, starting in 1852 with finding her again when she set up her new life for herself, and then in 1880 with kind of this cowboy-style bride escaping on a horse, and in 1895 she was out in the desert, 1912 she was diving, 1923, 1941 in the war, which makes me think that she run into G.I. Robot back then, or maybe the Justice Society of America, you never know. And then 1991, we got a rock star bride. We also had a samurai version of the bride, and I guess this just leads me to ask, which version of the bride did you guys like best? Which look did you find coolest? But it's pretty cool how they showed all of these different versions of her moving around the world throughout history. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of episode 2. And it's just kind of like, what's next? You know, I know what happens next, but it's going to be very intriguing hearing your thoughts and, you know, what is the message that Cersei has for her leaders? You know, where are things going to go after this moment with Cersei? What is the larger plot? You know, it can't just be as simple as protecting Princess Ilana Rostovic from Cersei. Like, why is this all happening? And there is, as I said in my no spoilers review, a surprising larger story that, you know, I was like, oh damn, this kind of makes the stakes quite a bit higher, and you will learn that very, very, very soon. But obviously, I can't get into details there until next week when we get into episode 3. But you see what I mean now after seeing both episodes. I felt like it was a good double episode drop, and I will say it does get better and better the more it goes along, with probably like maybe the best episodes being episode 4 or 5. So let me know if you enjoyed the bride's backstory in this episode. There is more to be littered throughout future episodes as well. It's not just like per episode, per character backstory or flashback. It is still like twinkled interestingly throughout the rest of the season. But I'm going to shut up now. I've said enough. I would love to know any thoughts, any theories as to what I already discussed. Let me know your thoughts on Cersei and the Themyscira exposition that will dump there, and any theories you have on top of everything else. If you enjoyed this video, I would deeply, deeply appreciate a like. If you did enjoy it, consider subscribing for more videos just like this. But I am going to love you and leave you now. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, I won't be back until next Wednesday. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Creature Commandos or people of the DCU in the next video. Goodbye.